If you know me, you know that I hyper-focus on one thing from time to time and then just move on to the next thing, eventually circling back and hyper-obsessing over that initial thing. Right now, I am, without a doubt, completely obsessed with Final Fantasy. Let's talk about it. Hello there, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. So today I want to talk about my experience playing through the early Final Fantasy games, talk about my history with Final Fantasy as a whole, because I have been so obsessed with these games recently. Of course, coming off the release of Final Fantasy 16, which I have not beaten, and we'll talk about that in a bit. Finally going to these classic games and playing them, and actually really enjoying them more than I thought I would for what they are, considering they are NES games. But they're so important. They are such important NES games, and seeing the blueprint that they set, granted, Dragon Quest said it, but you know what I'm saying, right? These early, mid-80s games, and seeing what they did back then and seeing the stories they could tell, it's been very interesting. So to kind of set the stage for my history with Final Fantasy, right? I played 7 on an emulator back in like 2007, or around there, right? I was very young and I never finished it. And I've still never finished the original version of 7. Throughout the years after that, I would occasionally, toy around. I played a little bit of 10 at some point, played a little bit of 15 when it came out. The first Final Fantasy game I ever beat was Final Fantasy 15 Pocket Edition. That's not a joke. I remember that September 2018 Direct very well, where, Final Fantasy had always been something I knew I wanted to get into, but for me, committing to 100-hour JRPGs or even 50-hour JRPGs is kind of hard. Even though I know I'll love it, it's just a lot of time to really sit down with one game. I play a lot of games. I like to move around, as I said. So it's something I never really got into. But when that September 2018 Direct happened and they dropped the announcements for 7, 8, or sorry, not 8, 7, 9, 10, 10, 2, 12, and then Pocket Edition and Chocobo's Mystery Dungeon, and just every Final Fantasy game, World of Final Fantasy, I was like, okay, I have to do this. I have to actually play Final Fantasy, because at that point, I'd already played through every Kingdom Hearts game. Like, I was already caught up on Kingdom Hearts, so I already knew, I liked it. I just hadn't taken the true plunge and beaten a game yet, so I think Final Fantasy 15 Pocket Edition dropped that day, like they shadow dropped it, so I downloaded it, played it, and was like, huh, that was actually pretty good. I was surprised by how much I liked Pocket Edition, so I then immediately went and played through 15, because I had gotten 15 on launch, and I just never played it all the way through. So I did that. So I played Pocket Edition and then 15 back to back, which was very funny to do. But honestly, I think it made me appreciate 15 more than maybe a lot of people did, with those high expectations coming into it in 2016, because it was delayed for so long, right, with Versus 13 and all that. So playing Pocket Edition, I think, actually made me appreciate 15 more than a lot of people. I also played it after most of the DLC was out and a lot of the fixes were done, so that also probably helped. But I love 15. I freaking adore 15. I want to replay it soon, because I really like that game. From there, my best friend loves 13, and 13 is another very controversial Final Fantasy game. So I played that because he kept talking about it. I was like, okay, I gotta see the hype. I'd always seen, lightning around and marketing. I remember I had a poster of, I think, 13.2 in my room, like I cut out of a game magazine when I was a kid. I was like, oh, this is a cool poster, I'll put it up. So stuff like that. But I finally played 13 in early 2019, and I distinctly remember not loving it. However, my experience with 13 is very interesting, and it's another game I want to replay, because as I look back on it, my memories with that game, I only remember the positives. The music, the characters, the world, the graphics. I mean, that game's beautiful for a PS3 game. Looking back, I only remember the positive things and not the nitpicks. I remember I actually liked the battle system. So in the moment, I distinctly didn't like it. Maybe it's because my roommate or my best friend at the time had hyped it up so much, and I was like, I had crazy expectations. But looking back through this lens, almost a nostalgia lens at this point, 4 years ago, almost 5, I think I actually really like 13. I need to replay it. And then I immediately played 13 too, and I like that even more than 13. Though at the time I still didn't super love it. But I really want to go back and replay those games, because like I said, I only remember the positives, and those positives seem like really great things. And I've watched Resident Arc did a great video retrospective on 13, kind of going over the issues, but I think I'll really like 13 again if I replay it. From there, I didn't really play that much. I didn't play 7 or 9 or 10 or 8 when they all came to Switch that year. I think the next Final Fantasy game I played was probably 14, which I just did earlier this year. So there was a pretty big gap there, unless I'm forgetting something. Editing Bo coming in here. Yeah, I forgot about Final Fantasy VII Remake. You know, one of the best Final Fantasy games. I also forgot about Crisis Core, a game I reviewed on this channel not even a year ago. Ay. Yeah, 14 would probably be the next one for me. And I played through A Realm Reborn. I think the story, it was hard to really get invested in for me because that was my first MMO experience, but I really enjoyed my time with it. I don't know if I enjoyed it because of what the game is, or because I was playing it with a close friend, a little bit of both maybe. I'm excited to get back to it. In fact, this past week of playing through these Pixel Remasters has made me very excited to get back to it and play through Heavensward, which I know is when it apparently gets really good. But yeah, watching like lore breakdown videos on 14 and the music especially. Oh, that's a key point. That is a key point that I'm forgetting. Theatrhythm. Theatrhythm has been an incredible kind of gateway for me for Final Fantasy. I don't listen to video game music outside of the context of video games normally. There are a couple exceptions to that, Bastion and Hades and Transistor from Supergiant. Those are just on my regular Spotify playlists, but I'm not listening to Final Fantasy music on Spotify, right? So Theatrhythm, I played that on 3DS actually when I was a kid, so I guess that would have been the first 3DS or first Final Fantasy game I beat, probably. And I love the music. So when Theatrhythm Final Bar Line got announced, I was super excited, and I put like 50 hours into it earlier this year. Really enjoyed it, and that's actually what prompted me to get into 14, because I was like, damn, 14's music's really good. So I've always loved the music, just for more set dressing for the stage here. So yeah, Theatrhythm, love the music, all that, which got me into 14, which then leads us into 16. So 16 was just released maybe 2 weeks ago, right? When that game was announced, it was easily my most hyped PS5 game. I think I'm like 15 hours in right now. I want to reserve judgment. I'm honestly not loving it as much as a lot of other people. I don't want to get too much into that right now. And like I said, I want to reserve judgment until I finish it, see the full story, see all the abilities that Clive has. But I'm not super loving it, right? I didn't love it from the demo. Even leading up to release, although I was super excited when it was announced, with each passing trailer and all the icon battles, and just like, it kind of just felt like Godzilla, you know, monsters mashing up against each other. Yeah, it's very stylish, but it kind of lacks substance. That's what, like, the impression I was getting, and that is how I'm feeling playing through it right now, but I don't want to say anything concrete on 16. I'm sure after I finish it, I'll at least appreciate it for what it is, so I don't want to be too negative on 16. But 16 releasing, to the point, getting all around, setting up all of this just to talk about Pixel Remasters. I finally cracked open a PlayAsia copy of the Final Fantasy Pixel Remasters. I'm a collector, so I decided to just keep this one sealed. This is the special edition that I just happened to get. I was up that night when the pre-orders went up in December for this beautiful thing back here. And I feel bad because, like, I'm a new Final Fantasy fan, and I know actual hardcore Final Fantasy fans gonna get it, but alas, I just happened to be awake. Let's talk about Pixel Remasters. I started playing Final Fantasy 1 right after 16 came out because my friend Tucker was talking about 16 on the Nintendo Select podcast, which you should listen to. And I was like, you know what? I want to finally play the Pixel Remasters. Because I wanted to get to it in April, but then the Xenoblade DLC came out, and then Zelda came out, so kind of just bad timing. Started with 1. It's good. Final Fantasy 1 holds up. It actually surprised me. It's not the most in-depth. It is an NES game. Go in with that in mind, you know? The story isn't super in-depth. It's very interesting, though. I didn't realize that the Final Fantasy Origin game, Stranger in Paradise, I knew it was, like, related to 1. I didn't know it just straight up was 1, pretty much, with time travel and all that. Some very cool blueprints for the series laid out there. Of course, the music, the basic battle mechanics, basic class systems, all of that. Final Fantasy 1's a good time. I enjoyed it. I did use some of the modern affordances of the Pixel Remaster. I'm not going to deny that. I did 2 times XP for majority of the playthrough. I did no encounters in certain dungeons when I was just like, okay, I just want to get through the end of this. So I didn't have that pure natural experience that a lot of people would have with it, but that's fine. I know some people, that is like sacrilege. You cannot mess with, you cannot taint a JRPG. I have a lot of games to play, and I don't think speeding up some battles or doubling XP is going to completely take away from the experience. I do try to avoid doing it all the time. Like, I'll turn it back to 1% or whatever if I feel like I'm way too overleveled, that kind of thing. But I did use some of those modern affordances. Final Fantasy 1 is good. It's just good, though. Like, it's an NES game, right? Then we get to Final Fantasy 2, which I started and beat immediately after 1. And these are pretty short games. Final Fantasy 1's maybe 8 hours, 10 hours, and then Final Fantasy 2 is a similar length, maybe a little bit longer, depending. Final Fantasy II, my entire life, I've heard of described as the black sheep of the Final Fantasy series, right? Now, to Tucker's point on the podcast, he said, like, oh, there's a ton of black sheep in the Final Fantasy franchise. It's 2, it's 13, it's 15. Totally true. That is totally true. I guess of the classic, like, 8-bit, 16-bit era, I would say 2 is the black sheep, right? Most people put 2 at the bottom of the list. I love 2. I really, actually, genuinely loved 2. I think the world and characters are really rich and well developed. I think it's an NES game, once again, going through it with that lens. There's more they could do. In fact, I would say if they were to remake any like NES game for me, this would be like number 1 right now. Of course, playing with the modern, the Pixel Remaster like updates and all that, it definitely doesn't look like an NES game, right? But the characters and their struggles and this plot and this very serious tone, characters die. I can't think of an NES game that released before this that has so much impact and weight to its world and characters and the events that happen. Is the villain a little one-note? Sure. But for an NES game, just going through and seeing towns get destroyed throughout, like, I was very blown away. I'm gonna be completely. I would go as far as to say I was blown away with Final Fantasy II for what it is. Is it one of the greatest games ever made? Absolutely not. Is the battle system really weird? Yes. You level up skills, not your characters, which I've seen and doing all my research recently that apparently that is how Romancing Saga is. Which, if those stories are there, I think I will actually like Romancing Saga. So I need to get those on Switch because I think they all are on Switch actually. Yeah. So I need to play through those now, I guess. But I really enjoyed Final Fantasy II. The music, the world, really good. If you are a fan of good stories and if you want to see what I would have to imagine is one of the earliest not text-based adventures stories in video games, 2 is definitely up there. But maybe the story isn't going to be for everyone, go and form your own opinion, that kind of thing. Maybe I'm just weird for liking it. I don't know. I've always heard such bad things about it. So to actually go in and enjoy a story from this NES game and enjoy the combat, I was surprised. I was very surprised. And then we get to 3, the one I'm currently playing. I haven't finished 3 yet. This is what's interesting to me, right? Going through all these games back to back is just seeing the evolution and seeing how, I'm not sure how exactly the developer kind of split for these games. I assume it's pretty much the same team and they were just pumping them out every year, right? 3 is the first year they took a gap. There was no game, and I think, would that be 88 or something? I'm not sure the exact year. But like Final Fantasy 1 and Final Fantasy 2 came out back to back, then they took off a year, then they did 3. Final Fantasy 3 is very much more like Final Fantasy 1 in that it doesn't have set characters. You just name your character yourself, and if anything, it feels in like a lot of ways that the story takes a backseat to the gameplay, and this is where they get really crazy with the job system. This is where the map and like the vehicles and like your little airship and all that gets a lot more complex. The world map's more complex, at least seemingly so far, and just a lot more interactions with NPCs. So this has to be, once again, one of the earliest examples I can think of I'm not sure what the term for this would be, like NPC actors. Like the NPCs are doing little acts, they're doing quirky things, like spinning around like, oh, I gotta go leave the room, and then you just like see them do some quirky thing while they leave. Or, not to that point, but like, there's multiple occasions where you have to turn yourself into a toad and go through like this Minish Cap style area. Very cool stuff. I'm not liking it as much as 2, which I'm sure, once again, sacrilege. But I'm still really enjoying it. I think for me, the disconnect comes from the lack of named characters. I never play games, or I never connect with games where you name your character as much as other people. Like the Bethesda games are a great example of that. I don't love Oblivion or Skyrim because I want to have that set character. I want to see their story. So for me, Final Fantasy II, seeing Furion's story with Maria and Guy was awesome, and just seeing their plight, seeing Furion's quirks, he's very easily seduced, that kind of thing. I like that. So for going to 3 now, which is more reminiscent of 1, like I said, with the creative characters basically, has been a little, I want to say a little disappointing, just because I know at this point they clearly have the writing chops to do what they did with 2 again. And I'm not saying the story in 3 is boring or anything, but it's just not quite as there for me because of the characters, like I said. So knowing I've never played 4, 5, or 6, I'm excited to finish 3 and see how it all ends up. I'm so excited for 4 and 6 because I've heard similar things that 5, it goes back to like really more focused on classes and all that. Although I think there's preset characters in that. But I've always heard that 4 and 6 are like the games in this original set of 6 games. Like the best stories, the best worlds, the best character, like all of that. So I'm very, very excited to get to 4 after this. I think I'll probably take a break. I don't want to burn myself out too much because I still need to finish 3 and 16. So I'll probably end up taking a break, but kind of wrapping it all up here. I hyper focus on things. I hyper obsess over things. I'm very happy I finally have this moment with Final Fantasy. And that's what I always kind of try to do as a gamer. I try to like broaden the horizons and play things every year that have been on the backlog for a long time, or something I just, wanted to do for a while. Earlier this month or last month, I played Yakuza 0 for the first time. I've always wanted to play Yakuza, and lo and behold, I freaking loved it. So I need to get back to that as well, but playing through Final Fantasy for the first time, these original games, and truly kind of learning the starting point of the series, the history, watching retrospectives on YouTube and all that kind of stuff has been an absolute delight, to put it lightly. So maybe I'll keep you updated once I finish 6, do another video, or even just do individual videos on 4, 5, and 6 if I think there's enough to talk about there. I mean, I'm sure there is, but you know what I'm saying, right? So that is going to do it for this video. I just wanted to ramble about my current Final Fantasy obsession. I'm squirming. I'm squirming just thinking about playing more Final Fantasy 3 later. Also, before I end, actually, I specifically did not play the remake of 3, and I'm not going to play the remake of 4 because I want to be able to go to those later. I don't know if I'll ever play the Pixel remasters again. If I do, I'll play them on PS4 so I can go for the Platinum trophies. I'm playing them on Switch right now. But I wanted to play these original versions. Original, I know it's not quite original because they did up the sprites and all that. But I wanted to play as close to the original as I can on modern hardware so that later on I can go and play the 3D remake, which I probably would fix a lot of my issues with 3, actually, because I know they named the characters. But I can go to that later and have another jumping off point, another reason to love these games and replay these games. So that's specifically why I did not do that. For anybody before they comment, like, oh, you should have played the DS remake of 3, right? I think it's on Steam also, so that is why I did that. Until next time, folks, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed hearing me ramble about Final Fantasy and my current love of the franchise, subscribe and let me know your history with the franchise as well. I highly recommend, if you have not tried it out, if you are a fan of JRPGs, if you are a fan of great stories, give it a shot. They're pretty cheap on the eShop. Actually, maybe they're not cheap on the eShop. It's $75 for all 6 of them, but try them out. Wait for a sale, maybe, but get in the Final Fantasy. Basically, everybody should play Final Fantasy. If you like great stories, if you like JRPGs, I'm glad I've finally done this. I'm excited to do it with Dragon Quest, because I've never been in a Dragon Quest game. My most played Dragon Quest game is Dragon Quest Builders and Heroes, so similar situation there. But yeah, that's going to do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe here for more, and follow me on Twitter. Until next time, peace.